thank you, Sean, for allowing me some time to talk about this. This is kind of my my passionate speech, my call to action. I'm allowing you to guys think out of the box. I've been really humbled this year with the people I've met and the circumstances I've been thrust into, and really been had my mind thrust open to kind of thinking outside the box. My title for this one is ZNE codes are great, but we really needed a resiliency and decarbonization plan with great marketing. I couldn't come up with a shorter title. But really, this was born out of disasters last year. My best friend, gigantic heart, great guy, Oakland firefighter. He's a swiftwater rescue expert. And he got sent to Texas and to Florida to do swiftwater rescue and was gone for about 6 weeks. Coming back from Texas, he got turned around and went to Florida, and then he almost got sent to Puerto Rico, but he was just like, my body's broken, I need to go home. He got to Santa Rosa the Saturday night. Our fires were on the Monday morning. So him and his crew, about 20 of these guys coming back from Oakland Fire, came back and immediately started firefighting. This is Chris Lands, one of the lieutenants from Oakland Fire, and these guys are just prepared to do disaster response and completely unprecedented resiliency disasters that really tested their fortitude. Anyways, Neil got evacuated. He spent a couple nights at my house. His house was out of power for 7 days, and then finally got to go home, but then had to go back to work. So it really made me think of resiliency differences in our grid, and what that community asset means to me. It got me rethinking about what we were doing about ZNE codes and ZNE homes, and how we're dumping electrons on the grid at the wrong time, and how we're utilizing it, and really how do we treat our utilities, and how do we behave with our community asset, which I consider the grid is. And knowing that these guys are out there repairing utility lines and keeping our power on while our other first responders are trying to put the fires out. There's a lot of debate about, who started the fire, who's responsible for it, and whatever, but these guys are trying to give us resiliency. This is the morning of the fires, and the fire's going over the other side of the hill, and our linemen are out there trying to restore power to the rest of us that still had our homes. So it gave me a really great respect for that. The other thing that came out of it was really a deep reshaping of my thought patterns around the natural gas supply system and what it does in disaster. We had done in our community some resiliency planning around natural gas supplies, and we got some wrenches for our meters to shut off in case of an earthquake. But in the case of this fire event, they wiped out every home, and after everything was incinerated, all the natural gas flares were still burning when there was nothing left to burn. And it couldn't shut off the gas supply system because it would have shut down other sectors of the city that still needed gas supply. So it's like, okay, what is that? How do we shift that thought pattern behind, utilizing gas? And a lot of the people in this room came to help our community rebuild. And there's been some discussions around moratoriums around natural gas hookups, and we've really reshaped that around incentives for going to decarbonized solutions around electrification, things like that, which are encouraging, but yet gets out of the moratorium discussions. So another person who really humbled me, and you don't see her in here, Danielle Vitoff from Navigant Consulting. I was out in Pittsburgh at the New Buildings Institute. And I was listening to her presentation, and she brought up this concept of how we market our zero net energy buildings, our green buildings. And we're really kind of marketing to the people that want to save the world, whereas we really need to be marketing to the rest of the group. And she put up this argument about we need to be marketing the way we're marketing to the green, sustainable folks that want to do the right thing, but with the argument that everybody else wants in the people who want to prepare for doomsday. You know, the doomsday preppers want food, water, shelter, and security, but most of all, should put up self-reliance. And it's an argument that faces both. We all want self-reliance. Us as Americans want to have our American dream. We want to be resilient. We want to have our jobs. We want to have our security. And it goes to both arguments. So why aren't we talking to both groups in the same way, in the same thoughtful pattern, to get the heavy lifting that we need to do across the board, and not just for those that want to be resilient and green? And I call this the military grade resiliency. We learn a lot from our military. We learn a lot from NASA in those really far out examples of how we do resiliency, or in NASA how we're utilizing water and recycling every bit of thing in space. But I pulled this article up because I studied a lot about zero net energy buildings and forward operating bases in Afghanistan and Iraq, and the reasoning for going to zero net energy buildings or solar plus battery storage out there was really out of life safety. They were getting guys killed trucking in gasoline to try to fire those generators out. So it was just out of survival. But if they're doing it for that reason and cost effectively, why can't we do that? If we're going to that military grade solution, why can't we apply that in every home? And really, out of some of these disasters, we're doing just that. We're going to resilient-based solutions that go to our zero net energy goals. So taking that argument about resiliency, there was a twofold increase in Texas and Florida with storage and battery systems on the rebuilds than they were before. And that's just out of resiliency. It's not out of doing green. It was just somebody, hey, I want my refrigerator. I want my lights. I want to be able to charge my phone. Power goes out in the grid. That's resiliency planning. Puerto Rico is doing the same thing, right? They're trying to rebuild the grid on a grand scale, but hey, Musk comes in with the solutions of like, hey, we need to get hospitals up. That's resiliency planning. That argument, I think, is more powerful to get us towards our zero net energy goals. And frankly, we're going to have a very difficult time. I consult with architects and owners and engineers, and we have to explain why we're doing Title 24. We have to get buy-in for compliance. Our compliance percentages across the board are low, pulling permits for retrofits and things like that. We have to get buy-in for doing the right thing and what's code mandated, whereas the argument's already there for doing things right, doing things sustainably and healthy. So I come back to that discussion about resilient neighborhoods, and damn it, if every person that came into Sonoma County after those fires used the damn word of opportunity. This is an opportunity to do that. This is an opportunity to do this. And Ann and Bruce and a lot of the other people that were in the Rebuild Green Coalition just said, guys, it's not an opportunity, it's an imperative. We have to do things better. We have to bring our collective knowledge in to do things better. So talking about resiliency neighborhoods, if we're talking on, where's my SMUD folks? We're doing microgrid applications on the community scale or on the neighborhood scale that gives you some resiliency in the grid management, but it also gives this community some resiliency. This can be a resiliency center now in terms of disaster if we have that microgrid capability. And this is a project that WRNS Studio did with Interface Engineering. Living Building Challenge building. No red list materials, beautiful, wonderful building. It wasn't open yet, but the fire came over that hill, and you want to know where every firefighter was stacking up to fight that fire? Right in front of this school. This became a center of resiliency without it being an open resiliency center yet. But this building, powered solar power, battery storage, passive solar design, all electrified design, could be a resiliency center for those firefighters if they ever have to come back and fight the fires there. So it just got me thinking about, I've got friends that are on the board members of Sonoma County, having our meetings back at Sonoma County now, talking about resiliency buildings. And this was built to meet the Living Future Institute challenge, but it gives us that dual effect of resiliency planning. And it was just like, right? Stone Edge Farm. Microgrid. Islanded for 10 days in our fire event without disruption to their operations. So microgrids work. There's demonstrations out there, and working demonstrations. So I got to go back and talk to them about how they did this in the fire event. I haven't been able to do that, but man, right in my backyard, we can study this one all you want. What I'm calling for our design community is really going back to do passive survivable buildings. Prop 39 audits, we did so many schools where we audited them. And the schools that were designed in the 20s, 30s, 40s, 50s, they were beautifully daylit, cross flow ventilation. Those schools can function without power and still teach. Anything designed after 1970, you got to be black boxes, fluorescent lights, and terrible environments. But being able to night flush a building, this is a library in Sacramento that can really coast without power, and you can still read and function in there. And the daylighting is so well in this building that Nolan Cam did, that you can read a book there on a cloudy day and not have to have the lights on in most cases. Speaking differently about solar ready buildings, solar ready is in our code now. I hope you guys all know that. It's been there for a while, since 2013. But this was an evolutionary component to new construction. We need to have this thinking in our building designs so that we have buildings that can evolve over their lifetime. I'm talking about solar ready. I started talking about solar ready in 2010 when the code was coming up, and now I'm talking about battery storage ready buildings now, like I did 10 years ago. That technology will evolve. We'll need to have that be able to hook up. We're going to have carport infrastructure that's going to be able to plug in all those hybrids that we're going to bring, or EVs that we're going to bring online. We got to have that evolution in the building stock. So prepare your buildings to evolve. I do a lot of energy code training. I teach people to understand the Title 24 standards. I've done it for since the 1998 standards, but what I keep coming back to is education is key for understanding implementation and plan check. When we're going to be selling zero net energy homes, we need to have everybody understand what TDV is, what the EDR is. Nobody understands these acronyms, first off. They don't know how to implement it. They rely on us consultants to do it. We have aging engineers that are military trained engineers that are leaving the industry, and we got to replace all of that knowledge with the younger generation. So getting you experts back into the classroom would be lovely right about now. So that's my call to action for you folks. But one thing I'll point you to if you need energy code education, Energy Code ACE is a resource that we have in California for you. Free training for you. Thinking outside the box in training and development of codes and standards has really been a big thing in my life this year. When I started thinking about zero net energy codes and what every zero net energy building would do to our grid structure if they weren't being optimized, it made me bring up the concept of grid harmonization, grid citizenship, and out of that came New Buildings Institute and the U.S. Green Building Council putting the Grid Optimal initiative together, which is now a partnership with a lot of utilities, building designers, engineers, trying to figure out how do we make a metric for a grid optimized design that is a grid benefit rather than a grid impact. So look for that. But thinking outside the box of how we're going to solve these problems in the 5, 10, 15-year scale now with the collective knowledge. One thing that Ed mentioned today, Ed is going to be speaking at our Carbon Smart Building Date. This is an affiliate event to the Global Climate Action Summit. So when we're talking about change agents, this is a day for us to get those experts in the room and really affect change. What our imperative is right now is to get the concept of zero net carbon buildings and carbon operations and grid harmonization into the language for every governor to sign on to before they even get into the election race. So no matter who wins, we have a commitment to get that done. So it makes your job easier, Mozzie. But we need to get those commitments, and we're hoping this day will affect that level of change. So please get involved. We're going to have this as a limited group, 300 people, no more. to really get those change agents in the room, like this room is, to get commitments for that heading into the Global Climate Action Summit. Yeah. So last thing I wanted to talk about, and Panama Bartholomew was not here. We were going to play a little decarb Jeopardy with y'all and kind of data mine this. But I really want to call out to this group and get your collective knowledge. And this work really came out of Pierre's Building Decarbonization Working Group. This is an opportunity to us to identify education, identify legislature, which you've been working so diligently on, and outreach, best practice, consumer education, getting industry on board. We need to do a big brain dump out of this room and others to really identify the change agents, the dominoes that need to fall, the leverage points to make those dominoes fall, to really get decarbonization into codes and standards, like I said, incentive policies, things like that. So I'm calling on you folks to really get involved in decarbonization, and hopefully we can get some funding and research done to be able to drive those initiatives and give the legislators the ability and education and knowledge and uplift to have confidence in what we're doing around that, and then get it done. So that's my call to action for you guys. Just get involved, get together, ask good questions, be opening to learning a whole lot, and be humble about doing it, and teach. Yeah, we got a lot of education to share. So I learned a lot from you guys over the last 2 days. So thank you all for what you contributed here. So a big hand of applause to you guys. So, yeah, what can I do for you?
For those of you who know from the Building Decarbonizacion group and like Facebook in California, but not like just send an email me and
yep.
This been asked many times. Yes, there's an email list. I'll send it out to you guys. Most of you have already been CC'd. There's emails that go out to each of you, and the CC list is everyone in the room. So almost every email address is already in your inbox, and same with almost every presentation is already on your computer. But there are a couple of gaps, and we can fill those in and send out.
And one thing I'd like to highlight, we do want to do a lot of good work in California, because we know this is a big domino to fall. But there's a lot of work to do nationally and globally. So hopefully we're going to get World Green Building Council on board and USGBC to really affect change around the globe, and get materials accounting in India for their concrete as they're building. So yeah, let's figure out how we get it done.
Right.